Hello, this is Sooby, and in this video I'm going to demonstrate the motion blur settings that were introduced in patch 1.03 for Final Fantasy 16. So, the game is running on a PlayStation 5 on an LG C1 OLED at the moment with HDR turned off. So to begin, let's have a look at motion blur setting 5. So the game's in graphics mode and motion blur is set to 5, which is the strongest effect, and Square says it's the default. I'll now demonstrate what that looks like. So we'll just pan the camera around a little bit so that you can see the motion blur strength. I've chosen this location because of the trees and the sunshine in the background. The trees have a lot of detail in them, so I think you can see the effect of the motion blur a bit easier in this setting. So we'll now go to motion blur setting 4. Pan around a little bit, motion blur setting 4. There's 5 motion blur settings and a setting to turn it off. Now motion blur setting 3. Motion blur setting 3. This is my personal preference on the LG C1 OLED. Some people may find motion blur settings 4 or 5 to be a bit too strong, causing too much of a smearing effect. I think motion blur setting 3 is a nice balance. Now motion blur setting 2. Setting 2. A little bit more judder on the screen. Now setting 1. This is the minimum setting for having some motion blur on. Certainly more judder. And now we'll turn it off completely. So 0 is off. So certainly there is more judder. But of course, some people might be happy with that in order to get rid of all of the blur effect. So now I'll just run around a little bit and demonstrate what it looks like running around a bit on the field at motion blur settings 0, 3, and 5. So I'm just moving camera to side so that you can see the effect or the lack of the effect. Now go to motion blur setting 3. Okay, setting 3. Like I said, it's my personal preference. takes away some of the judder of motion blur settings off, or motion blur setting 1. It looks quite nice. Very smooth. Well, decently smooth. Now finally we'll go back to the default motion blur setting 5. So this is certainly quite strong, and some people may not like this setting. It may blur just too many of the details for them. Whereas motion blur setting 3 for me on the C1 OLED is a decent balance between the two. It's got decent smoothness, but without the strength of motion blur setting 5 and the smearing effect it introduces. But it'll be up to your personal preference what you like. And it's really nice that Square introduced these settings. And on the side note, I'd just like to say this is a really good, like for 30 frames per second on OLED. This is one of the better games to run at 30 frames per second on an OLED. Since sometimes OLEDs can have trouble with screen judder for 30 FPS games. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed that video. Have a good day.